What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Paranormal Dwarf, where we investigate the history, mysteries, legends, and hauntings together. Here at the Paranormal Dwarf, our goal isn't to tell you what to believe. It's to explore the documented history, examine eyewitness accounts, consider skeptical explanations, and present the evidence as accurately as we can. Some stories are supported by historical records. Others exist through personal testimony and local legend. Throughout this investigation, we'll make that distinction clear, leaving the final conclusion where it belongs, with you. Tonight, our investigation takes us into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in aviation history. But before we can examine the mystery, we first have to understand the remarkable woman at the center of it. Because long before Amelia Earhart disappeared, she had already changed the world forever. Amelia Mary Earhart was born on July 24th, 1897 in Atchison, Kansas. At the turn of the 20th century, society expected women to follow a predictable path: marriage, family, and domestic life. Careers were limited, opportunities were scarce, and aviation itself was still in its infancy. But Amelia rarely fit neatly into anyone else's expectations. As a child, she climbed trees, explored the outdoors, built homemade roller coasters with her younger sister Grace, and constantly searched for adventure. Her father struggled with alcoholism, creating instability that forced the family to move repeatedly. Financial hardships became common, and Amelia learned early that life could change without warning. But instead of discouraging her, those hardships strengthened her resolve. During World War I, Amelia volunteered as a nurse's aide in Toronto, caring for wounded soldiers. Many had served alongside military aviators, and for the first time, she heard first-hand stories about airplanes. Everything changed in December of 1920 when pilot Frank Hawks took her on a short flight over Long Beach, California. By the time the airplane had climbed only a few hundred feet, Amelia knew she wanted to fly. Learning to fly in the early 1920s wasn't easy. Amelia worked multiple jobs to pay lessons before training with pioneering instructor Nita Snook. She purchased a bright yellow Kenner Airster she nicknamed the Canary. In 1922, she set a women's altitude record of more than 14,000 feet. Throughout the decade, her reputation continued to grow. Then, in 1928, an opportunity arrived that would make her one of the most recognizable women in the world. In 1928, publisher George Putnam invited Amelia Earhart to become the first woman to cross the Atlantic Ocean as a passenger, aboard the aircraft Friendship. Although she did not pilot the airplane during that flight, newspapers around the world celebrated the achievement. Amelia welcomed the recognition, but privately, she wanted to earn her place through her own accomplishments. 4 years later, in 1932, she did exactly that. Flying alone across the Atlantic, Amelia became the first woman to complete the journey solo, cementing her place among aviation's greatest pioneers. Over the next several years, Amelia continued breaking records and promoting aviation. She advocated for women in flight, inspired countless young pilots, and accepted challenges that many believe were beyond human capability. Eventually, one goal rose above all others. She wanted to fly around the world near the equator, the longest attempted circumnavigation ever undertaken by air. To accomplish the journey, Amelia selected a Lockheed Model 10E Electra. specifically equipped with additional fuel tanks for long-distance flight. Veteran navigator Fred Noonan joined the expedition. Bringing years of experience navigating across the Pacific, their first attempt ended after an accident during takeoff in Hawaii, damaging the aircraft. Rather than abandon the dream, Amelia rebuilt the airplane and planned a second attempt. In June of 1937, she and Fred Noonan departed once again, successfully crossing continents and oceans as they worked their way eastward along the globe. By late June, only one major obstacle remained. Ahead of them stretched approximately 2,500 miles of the Pacific Ocean. Their destination was a tiny speck of land known as Howland Island. The next leg of the journey would become one of the most studied flights in aviation history, and after it, the world would never hear from Amelia Earhart again. On the morning of July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan departed Lae, New Guinea, aboard their Lockheed Electra. Their destination was tiny Howland Island, a remote speck of land in the Central Pacific. Though small in size, reaching it required crossing more than 2,000 miles of open ocean with remarkable precision. As the hours passed, Amelia remained in radio contact, reporting weather conditions, altitude, and fuel concerns. Each transmission painted the picture of crew working methodically without their destination in hand, but also revealed growing uncertainty. Howland Island measured little more than 1.5 miles long. Finding it from the air was comparable to locating a single grain of sand in an endless sea. Waiting nearby was the U.S. Coast Guard cutter USS Itasca. Sorry. If I butchered that, I apologize. Its crew stood ready to provide radio assistance and visual signals to help guide Amelia to the island, but almost immediately, communication problems began to unfold. The Itasca could hear some of Amelia's transmission. Amelia, however, appeared unable to hear many of theirs. As fuel continued to burn, the urgency increased. Among Amelia's final confirmed radio messages were reports that she was flying on the 157-337 line of position. Searching north and south for Howland Island, the crew aboard the Itasca listened anxiously. Then, silence. No further confirmed transmissions were ever received from Amelia Earhart's aircraft. Within hours, one of the largest search operations in aviation history was underway. Ships searched, aircraft scanned the Pacific. Days turned into weeks, but the Lockheed Electra and the 2 people aboard it were nowhere to be found. The mystery had only just begun. In the days following Amelia Earhart's disappearance, reports began pouring in from across the Pacific. Amateur radio operators, commercial stations, Navy personnel, and ordinary citizens claimed they had all heard distress calls that they believed came from Amelia's Lockheed Electra. Some messages sounded credible, others could never be verified. Investigators faced an impossible question. Had Amelia and Fred Noonan survived the initial disappearance, or were more desperate listeners hearing only what they had hoped to hear? Even if one of the strongest reports was genuine, it suggested the aircraft may have remained on land, or at least above water, long enough to continue transmitting. As the years passed, researchers turned their attention toward a remote coral atoll known as Nikumaroro. The island was uninhabited, isolated, and located along a route that Amelia might have reached if she had missed Howland Island. Expeditions recovered fragments of aluminum, personal artifacts, and evidence that people had once survived there for a time. In 1940, partial skeletal remains were discovered on the island. The original examination concluded the bones belonged to a man, but later analysis reopened the debate. To this day, no consensus has been reached, and no wreckage has been conclusively identified. For many investigators, Nikomararo remained one of the strongest theories, not because it explains everything, but because it leaves so few easy answers. Every expedition has uncovered intriguing clues. Every clue has generated new debate. And within each passing decade, the mystery has only grown. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart was no longer just an unsolved aviation case. It had become one of history's greatest mysteries. But Nikomararo was only one possibility. In the years that followed, new theories would emerge. Some grounded in evidence, others fueled by speculation, and all of them attempted to answer one question: what really happened to Amelia Earhart? As the decades passed, several competing explanations emerged. The crash and sink theory remains the conclusion favored by many historians, suggesting Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan exhausted their fuel while searching for Howland Island and were lost at sea. Others believe they reached Nikomararo and survived for a time as castaways. Another theory claims they landed in the Marshall Islands and were captured by Japanese forces. Each theory has supporters. Each has unanswered questions, yet none has been proven without a reasonable explanation. The historical records provide a solid foundation. Amelia departed lay on July 2nd of 1937, transmitted increasingly urgent radio messages, and was never seen again. Beyond those documented events, the evidence becomes less certain. Artifacts, eyewitness accounts, radio reports, and later discoveries continued to be studied, debated, and challenged. At the Paranormal Dwarf, it is important to distinguish documented history from interpretation. Some clues are compelling, others remain speculative. The mystery survives because no single explanation answers every question. Perhaps Amelia Earhart's greatest achievement was never the mystery of her disappearance. She inspired generations to dream bigger, challenge explanations and expectations, and pursue goals once thought impossible. Nearly a century later, expeditions still search the Pacific. Historians continue to examine new evidence. The hope of finally solving the mystery has never disappeared. Whether the answer is discovered tomorrow or remains forever hidden beneath the waves, Amelia Earhart's legacy endures. Whether Amelia Earhart was lost at sea, whether she reached a distant island, or whether the Pacific still guards the truth, one thing remains certain: her courage changed aviation forever. Thank you for joining me on this investigation. Until next time, keep exploring the history, uncovering the mystery, and following the legends wherever they may lead.